Okay, so you've brought us this really fascinating piece. We're calling it historical fiction for now, A Forbidden Love.
Hmm.
And it's exploring a connection I don't think anyone really expected.
That's right. These excerpts, they lay out a story about Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy after the war. They're both working at the Ministry of Magic.
Right, the ministry.
And the setup is, well, it's an unlikely alliance, really, kind of forced on them by circumstances.
And what we're trying to get into today, as we understand it, is looking at how these really deep-seated prejudices, how they can be challenged, maybe even overcome.
Yeah,
And the story, even though it's fictional, it feels like a pretty compelling way to, examine that.
definitely.
So the big question is, can two people from backgrounds that are just so different, carrying all that weight of a divided past, can they find common ground? Maybe even, well, love. Let's dive in.
Okay.
So the story starts in the Ministry archives. Dusty, full of history. What's the significance there, do you think? Why start there?
Well, the archives themselves, they're like a storehouse of history, aren't they? Some of it celebrated, some maybe pushed aside.
Sure.
So it immediately kind of grounds their first meeting in all that history, that past conflict, those really ingrained divisions, makes what happens next even more intriguing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the text highlights Hermione's initial reaction, repulsion, basically, which, given their history, is totally understandable.
Of course.
But then there's this mention of Draco's quiet intensity, his haunted look. It sort of hints the war left scars on everyone, maybe, not just the obvious victims.
That's a really interesting point. It speaks to how complex reconciliation actually is. The fighting stops, but the biases, the gut reactions, they don't just disappear overnight.
Right.
Hermione's repulsion is, well, it's natural, but her noticing that haunted look, that's maybe the first flicker of empathy. Seeing the shared human cost, maybe despite everything.
A crack in the armor, perhaps?
Exactly. A tiny one, but it's a start. It's crucial for challenging prejudice, seeing the person behind the label.
Okay, so then there's this artifact, a mysterious artifact that forces them to collaborate. They're both not pleased about it, according to the text.
Yeah.
Mutual displeasure.
Yeah.
Is this just, a handy plot point to get them in the same room? Or is there more to this forced teamwork?
Well, I mean, it does move the plot forward, obviously, but it also mirrors things that happen in the real world, doesn't it? People from opposing sides sometimes have to work together on something.
True, like a common enemy or a shared problem.
Exactly. And those situations, even if you start off resisting, they can force you to see things differently. Just the act of working together side by side can challenge your assumptions.
Okay, so let's unpack that shift. The story says this forced proximity changes how they see each other. Hermione starts noticing Draco's intellect, his vulnerability even, which clashes with the old image of him, the bully.
Right.
How does that happen? How do you suddenly see someone you thought you knew completely differently?
It's the humanizing effect, isn't it? When you're forced into close contact, you move beyond the group label, beyond just the past actions. You see the complexities. So Hermione, seeing his intellect, that challenges her old ideas about him and maybe others like him. And the vulnerability, that reveals a shared humanity. It cuts through the old roles. It shows how, direct experience can really fight prejudice.
And it works the other way too, right? Draco sees past Hermione's, war hero status, her bravery. He sees her loyalty, her compassion.
Exactly. It's like the war forced them into these very rigid boxes.
Gryffindor hero, Slytherin villain.
Pretty much. And taking away that immediate conflict, that pressure, it allows for a more nuanced view. Draco seeing her loyalty, her compassion. Maybe he didn't associate those things with her or her type before. It breaks down that us versus them thing.
Okay, and then things get more personal.
Yeah.
These late-night work sessions, fueled by coffee apparently, turned into whispered conversations and shared laughter. It sounds almost normal, like any colleagues bonding over a tough project, except it's them. How does just working late together, something so mundane, start breaking down such massive barriers?
Well, shared experiences, especially ones that involve maybe a bit of stress or challenge, they build camaraderie, don't they?
Yeah, definitely.
And the whispered conversations, the shared laughter, that shows it's moving beyond just, getting the job done. It's becoming personal, finding common ground, even through humor, sharing little vulnerabilities. That builds empathy. It chips away at the old animosity.
And this connection, it blossoms into this forbidden attraction. But the story doesn't ignore the world around them. There are whispers. disapproving glances from colleagues.
Right, the backlash.
What does that reaction tell us? That even though the war is over, the prejudice is still very much alive.
Oh, absolutely. It shows how that fear of the other, it just lingers. It manifests as social disapproval, right? Society has its norms, its expectations, often built on those old divisions. And relationships that cross those lines, they make people uncomfortable. The whispers, the glances, it's the power of social pressure, the resistance to challenging those norms.
So naturally, they have to meet in secret. Hidden corners of the ministry. And these moments, a tentative touch, a lingering gaze, a stolen kiss, they're framed as defiance.
Yes.
Is their relationship becoming symbolic? Even if that's not their main intention.
I think it has to, yeah.
Yeah.
Choosing to pursue this connection, knowing the risks, knowing the disapproval, it automatically positions their relationship as a challenge to how things are supposed to be.
A rebellion almost.
A quiet one at first. But yes, those intimate moments become acts of rebellion against prejudice, against what society expects. It really shows how personal choices can ripple outwards, have bigger social meaning.
Well, like you said, the backlash.
Yeah.
The secret gets out. Exposed by a jealous colleague, the text says? Seems almost predictable.
Unfortunately, yeah, in that kind of environment.
And the fallout is huge. Shockwaves through the ministry and the wizarding world. Why such a strong reaction? It's just two people, isn't it? Or is it more than that?
It's definitely more than that. Their relationship, it hits a nerve. It touches on these really sensitive societal fault lines, the ones left over from the war.
Okay.
It forces everyone else to confront their own biases, the rules they live by, maybe without even thinking about it. The shock waves, they show just how much resistance there is when you challenge those deep-seated structures and prejudices.
And look at how people react. Hermione gets called naive and reckless. Draco is seen as manipulative and opportunistic.
Exactly. They're trying to force them back into the old boxes, aren't they? Reinforcing the stereotypes tied to their pasts, their houses.
Yeah, like society's trying to make it make sense in the old way.
It's a defense mechanism, really. Slap on the familiar labels, dismiss the relationship, and you don't have to think too hard about whether your own beliefs might be, well, wrong, or at least incomplete.
But the story stresses they stand together, united front, despite all the judgment, the accusations. They argue love, no house, no blood purity, no past mistakes.
And that's powerful.
What's the significance of them sticking together like that so publicly?
It's absolutely crucial. It shows their commitment is real. It's stronger than the social pressure. By saying it out loud, love transcends these old categories, these prejudices. They refuse to be defined by them anymore. That kind of unwavering stance, that conviction, it becomes a catalyst. It forces others to actually listen, to maybe question their own assumptions. It suggests real change often needs people to stand up and defy the norms, even when it's incredibly difficult.
And it works to some extent. It sparks this widespread debate. It's not instant acceptance, far from it, but it opens up the conversation.
Exactly. You get those contrasting reactions, people digging their heels in, clinging to the old ways, condemning them. But then others start seeing their love as maybe a symbol of hope.
Right. Why is just having the debate so important?
Because public debate drags the unspoken stuff out into the light. The biases, the assumptions people didn't even realize they had.
Okay.
The fact that there are contrasting reactions shows their relationship has created this cognitive dissonance. People are forced to grapple with it. And that discomfort, that dialogue, it's a necessary step if you're going to reevaluate and maybe, just maybe, dismantle some prejudices.
The narrative seems to suggest their unwavering commitment was the real key. Not just the idea of their love, but the fact they stuck with it publicly.
Yes, I think that's spot on.
What does that tell us about how change actually happens? Is it more than just winning arguments?
I think so. It suggests lasting change needs more than just, good points or logical arguments. It needs that consistent action, that visible conviction.
Walking the walk.
Exactly. They're sticking together. Despite everything, it's a tangible example. It makes their message harder to dismiss. It really highlights the power of personal integrity, of resilience when you're facing down societal resistance.
And this leads to real change in the story. The ministry repeals old laws. Families start to reconcile. Old wounds begin to heal. Their personal story becomes a catalyst for a new era, one focused on inclusivity. That feels pretty optimistic.
It is optimistic.
Is that kind of outcome realistic?
Yeah.
When we think about real-world conflicts and divisions?
Well, while it is definitely an optimistic take, it does highlight something crucial: the power of personal stories. How individual acts of courage, of connection, can inspire broader shifts. It suggests that when these stories get amplified, when people embrace them, they really can help tear down discriminatory structures, help foster more inclusivity. The healing part, that speaks to the long, slow process of reconciliation that has to happen after you challenge the prejudice. It doesn't happen overnight.
So the story ends by framing their whole journey as fraught with peril. But it becomes a legend, a reminder that love could blossom where it was least expected, and that these unlikely alliances could pave the way for a brighter tomorrow. So looking at this narrative, you can kind of see a pathway, can't you? How even these really entrenched barriers, the ones built up by history and conflict and prejudice, how they might start to crumble when individuals dare to connect and just refuse to back down.
Exactly. It shows the potential impact of challenging norms through personal connection and sheer conviction.
So this story, fictional, yes, but it does make you think, doesn't it?
It really does.
What are the forbidden loves or the unlikely alliances in our own world today? The connections that seem impossible. Could they be the key to bridging some of the divides we face, to fostering more understanding, more acceptance?
It's a powerful question. What connections are out there, maybe just under the surface, that could spark those difficult conversations, those shifts in perspective we need for a more inclusive future? Makes